Across the animal kingdom, animals rely on language and communication to survive. The many different forms of language and communication that have evolved differ by degree, but with recent discoveries revealing the complexity of animal language, researchers have found that there might be no single property or processing capacity that marks the many ways in which the complexity and detail of human language differs from non-human communication systems. The complex production and processing capacities that make these communication systems possible are the products of millions of years of evolution, which have led to highly specialized anatomical and neural mechanisms that enable each species to transmit and process its own form of language and communication. Through sound, scent, language, body language, song, echolocation, electricity, and ultrasound, each species communicates in a world that is beyond the perception of other species. Every species inherits the innate ability to communicate with its own species, and communication can begin even before birth. Each species shares complex information that is relevant to that species' way of life on the evolutionary path. This complex information is mostly imperceivable to other species. So when it comes to cross-species communication, we can't share detailed information, but we can communicate nonetheless, because we share common experiences and recognize them in each other. Cross-species communication relies on nonverbal means, such as gesture, body language, tone of voice, facial expressions, eye contact, and directing attention. It requires communicative flexibility, which is a trait found across the species. Communicative flexibility requires understanding another's perception and moderating how you communicate with them. Based on what you know, they will understand. Researchers showed that chimps helped humans find food with gestures the chimps modified for them. This behavior is associated with complex cognitive skills such as intentionality, because interactants modify their communication in response to another's understanding of their meaning. This communicative flexibility is seen across the species, and other species have figured out many different ways to convey their emotions, needs, and intentions to other species with nonverbal communication. Through body language, tone of voice, reading facial expression, gesturing, mimicry, play, gestures, body contact, eye contact, gaze, and even inventing new sounds. Cats have adapted their voices to communicate more effectively with humans. For example, adult cats meow at humans, but otherwise, meowing is generally only used for communication between kittens and their mothers. New forms of communication develop the longer different species cohabitate. As dogs, cats, and humans spend time together in a house, they can learn communications unique to the pair or group. And unique forms of communication can be figured out between individuals. Gaze is an important signal for humans and describes the communicative function of dogs' and cats' eye gaze behavior with humans. Wolves use gaze to communicate with others. Gaze, would have helped dog-human cooperation for hunting and gathering before humans began establishing cultures based on cultivation and settlements. When dogs receive human gaze, they change their behavior depending on its direction. Dogs detect a human's attentional state from the direction of their gaze. Furthermore, dogs expect what humans can see and change their behavior accordingly. Dogs can also use their own gaze to guide a human's gaze. This alternating gaze is thought to have the function of joint attention, directing others' gaze to an object to garner problem-solving cooperation. In humans, alternating gaze followed by joint attention is thought to be related to identifying intention and establishing reference. Kangaroos also use gaze to talk to humans and to ask them for help. Goats can interpret human cues, such as gaze, gesture, and emotion, to gather information about their surroundings, and they use gaze to ask for help. Cross-species communication requires reading emotion and intent in voice and intonation. Companion animals learn to recognize a human's voice, emotion, and intonation. Furthermore, dogs and cats generate visual images when they hear vocalizations of faces. Much of cross-species communication occurs by reading the emotional state of others. Dogs and cats can distinguish between signals based on human emotions and change their behavior depending on the emotional state of humans. Dogs exhibit social referencing by looking at and using facial expressions and behaviors of others in unfamiliar situations. Likewise, cats change their behavior depending on the human emotional state. As with dogs, they distinguish between humans' facial expressions and associated postures. Horses also read human facial expressions for emotional reference to situations. And humans have learned how to read emotional cues in the facial expressions of horses. 17 facial expressions are now recognized. Reading emotion and intent is the common language shared across species. And while we may not be able to understand the specific meaning of another species' language, we can understand intent and emotion. Cross-species communication requires emotional intelligence. Studies found that humans who were better at human empathy tests were better at decoding emotions in animal sounds.